I think I broke a record on that one.
As far as longest sentence?
Well, I think you might have talked 13 seconds, and I took the rest of the 28 minutes.
Dude.
That might be our best one yet, honestly.
Fair.
Welcome to the show, where air takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the king of the new stack empire, Rich Swire. Empire Swire, it actually rhymed today. It worked out.
Yeah, you're Dr. Seuss over here.
Very Seussical.
Like
but we're not going to talk about green eggs and AI.
Oh my God.
Yeah, my shitty joke. We're going to talk about renewing the new stack, like untangling the workflow and the AI layers. So, Rich, let's get right into it. Workflow versus AI layer and really knowing the difference. With a lot of our clients over the last 6 or 8 months that we've been diving in on some of these more complex projects, I feel like this is where we have to do the most pulling apart to help people understand like what is actually being done with AI and what is actually being done through like workflows and automations and like information gathering.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about this in past episodes where we start to see this kind of new world developing, and it's being driven by obviously 3 major forces. The first one being that we have to now build our applications that are AI ready, right? They have to be able to integrate with these foundational models because it's so powerful. And it just didn't exist before. Nothing like it has existed before. And the second big kind of momentum that we're seeing is obviously this new wave of, I guess you could call it vibe coding, but even before vibe coding, this idea that you are building these applications using AI, right?
Yeah.
So AI actually developing the code for itself to operate, which has its own element of shift toward this new stack. And then finally, I think the whole user experience, right? The user experience is now kind of evolving into, well, the default is I'd rather have an agent do something for me than me do it. Moving away from, navigation, navigation bars and scrolls and clicks and moving more toward, conversation, like the obviously ChatGPT leading the way on that, like changing the entire way we talk to our computer or talk to AI. But if you kind of go deeper, which is really what we're going to hit on this episode, what's driving this underneath is that there's this rise of new technology platforms that are kind of there as a necessity, but also kind of filling the gaps of where these things lack, right? So you have the user experience, which is shifting from these ugly old SaaS products into much more elegant voice or chat or, much more conversational UI.
Yeah.
You have the databases that are now having to evolve into maybe large language models or more vectorized databases that can be used to integrate with those language models, right? So now everybody's scrambling to take their all this data, shift it into some sort of data lake or some sort of knowledge base that they can expose it to the AI model, right? But in the middle, it gets a little bit fuzzy. And I think we're still in the early days of this, but what I would describe in the world of middleware is it used to be that when I built a web application, the middleware would be some sort of, obviously you have your web application layer, but then you'd have some sort of like application interface or some sort of API integration, or maybe even more so, you might even be some sort of middleware like Java or, if you're using, whatever your development tool is. If you're doing the LAMP stack, then, you'd be using, PHP or whatever it might be. Yeah. So that middle area is kind of now up for grabs as far as like what is going to change there to make these end points work better. So over here, you have this like extraordinarily smart, very interesting new kind of data layer, which is the LLMs. And then, of course, you have this new UI. So what the middle is starting to kind of consolidate into is really like 3 parts. The first part is, okay, it's great. I have this model. I have this AI. I can ask it questions and it can give me great answers. But for me to actually execute a task or for me to give it agency, right? If I want to build an agentic AI, I actually have to give it functionality and workflow and sequences, right? So
yeah.
Now,
you gotta know what you want it to do.
Yeah. So like, let's say I just say, I want AI to be triggered to start every morning at 8 a.m. Right.
Mhm.
So now you're now outside of the capabilities of what I would call the core foundational models and what a data layer can do.
Yep.
You're not necessarily triggering a conversation through some sort of UI because you're saying, no, I just want it to automatically at AM
At this time, do this
do this task. So now you need something in that middle area that's basically
to trigger that work.
that has a workflow and sequence and so forth. And people are now using platforms to do this in the true spirit of kind of a zero code goal. And these platforms are kind of like, not kind of, I guess, include things like N8N, which is what we use, Make, even Zapier to some degree people are using. And then there's some other kind of sequential platforms that are out there as well. Those are just happen to be the ones that come to top of mind. But, everybody knows what it looks like. What it looks like is, it's almost like a flow chart, right? You have a box here that says, when it's 8 a.m., do this. And it triggers the next node and it triggers the next node. And then it looks like a workflow. And then somewhere in that workflow, it might call the AI agent and do something. It might also call some third-party app and do something. But at the end of the workflow, it just kind of completes its task, right?
Right.
So that's becoming kind of like a core part of this new stack is what we're basically titling this episode, which didn't really exist. I mean, it existed obviously in the universe, but it didn't really exist in the mindset of like a what I would call a traditional software developer's mind. You would either build that natively inside of your application, or you might use it tangentially, but you're not going to necessarily say, oh, okay, I'm going to put all my workflow logic into this third-party app. And what's happening is people are doing that, right? These workflow engines are becoming critical on how you go from A to B to C, leveraging AI as far as an LLM, and as well as exposing to this kind of simple, the user interface. Now, a lot of people are kind of labeling the combination of those three things as an AI agent, and I don't think anybody has the right.
That's kind of like the spaghetti code piece from previous, right? It's like you're taking all this stuff and throwing it together, but it's like it's not really an agent at that stage.
Yeah, so there's some nuance to what an agent really is. Some people define an agent through what it can do or what it's possible it can do. I think that's a little bit kind of constricted, but I also think there's probably room for, like, if I build out a workflow and I put AI to work and it does it autonomously, and even though I'm building this outside of the foundational, kind of ecosystem of like an OpenAI or Google, I still feel like it deserves kind of the adjective of being agentic and being an agent. But I do think it falls short to your point, which is for it to truly be what I would consider like a super agent, let's just call it that. And let's go ahead and trademark that, because in 6 months,
Super Agent Go.
The CEO of Google is going to use it in their keynote. But if we talk about super agent level, what I mean by super agent is you actually have something that is leveraging all those components, but is also contributing to optimizing those components and building those components, right? And so what I mean by that is, like, it's almost like, imagine an agent that's self-healing or self-adapting and isn't necessarily under the thumb of that workflow engine, meaning it's being directed by that workflow, but is actually part of a smarter system. And it could be multiple agents that are helping with this, where it's constantly checking back and leveraging that workflow as instructions, but still has command and control over the ship, if that makes any sense. We're not necessarily there yet, but I'm going to tell you how we're going to get there. So what needs to happen and what needs to exist in order for us to go this kind of going from agentic workflow architecture of the new stack to more of a super agent architecture is you need really two things. One, you need to have a framework or platform that allows you to not only manage, deploy, and test and train your AI agents, which is like kind of like square number, first square of
it's the first thing you got to do.
You have to do is like check that box, which is exactly what we build, obviously self-plug there. But like with Rhea, that's what we knew right off the bat. Like once we started to build 20, 30, 40 AI agents, and as you mentioned, it starts to get spaghetti code. We knew back in the day, 3 years ago, we need a platform to manage this. This is not something that you can just have willy-nilly around in different code bases, especially if you're a larger enterprise. You need to have all the agentic activity. and management. You just like, if you had, like, it'd be like going, if you have 3 employees, you could get away with maybe managing them on a spreadsheet. But once you have 3,000 or 300,000 employees, you probably need to have a system, a management platform that manages all that, right? But beyond that, the next stage is going to be, all right, now that I can manage, train, and test my agents, and I have all the communication and all this, kind of integrated into this singular platform, what is going to evolve from that, and where the roadmap is heading, is that now these agents are, because they're on a singular platform, can now start to connect to each other, right? And start to understand what each other's skill set is and what workflows they have access to and what systems they have access to. So we're going to start seeing this kind of, some people are calling it in these early days kind of an orchestration layer. I think orchestration is just one element of what I'm talking about, because orchestration to me is like, okay, great. I can have an agent who's smart enough to know, hey, I can't do that task, but I know a buddy of mine, this other agent that can do it. Let me take all your information. Let me take the context. Let me take the conversation that we've had and pass it on to this other agent who actually can do what you're asking to do. And maybe it's because I don't have access to it, or maybe I have not been trained to do it, or maybe it's just sheerly based on the fact that the way that this agentic workforce was architected, you might have 30, 40, 60, 100 agents that all do different tasks, and you have this orchestration that happens through there. But I think it's actually more than that, and orchestration might be the first kind of brush at what people are imagining when they think of multi-agent capability. But when you start thinking about beyond that and understanding, like, okay, well, now I can actually have agents that aren't just like communicating to end users and doing tasks, but I actually have agents looking inwardly. Right? Like we support this today with our platform. Like we have an auditor agent that looks at conversations that are happening and flags if there's like violation of policy and so forth like that. Or we might have one that scores and audits conversations and summarizes it based on some sort of prompting that's determined by our customer,
right,
for whatever use case. So and then eventually, and this is what we're playing with today, is eventually you'll have agents that actually look at the code of these frameworks and these workflows and potentially applications that are built off of zero code environments or vibe coding, and you start to have this kind of interesting, it's almost like a snake eating itself. You have this meta layer of agents using the same kind of architecture to look at each other and kind of repairing and fixing and enhancing. And so you have this kind of agent to agent conversation happening. And so that's what I mean by when I say orchestration is the first layer, where an agent is kind of passing the buck to another agent, almost like if you were to call a support line and they say, oh, I can't help you, but let me give you to this person over here. That can, but that's a one-way pass on, right? And that's what I think when you think about orchestration, I think people need to think about differently. They have to think of it like, no, it's not just I'm talking to a human and I'm passing it to another agent to execute a task. Is that you could have multiple agents talking to each other, looking for ways that they can improve the entirety of the agentic relationship that they have, and then take that exponentially as you have many, many agents adding into the group. So, I'm imagining a world where you can actually have agents join in an agentic framework like what we've built, understand, oh, I'm here, I'm new. Hi, my name is Rich, just like a new employee, right? Yeah. I'm Rich, and Lee, what do you do? Oh, Jim, what do you do? And then he starts to understand, or he, she, whatever the pronoun of the AI would be,
but it can delegate knowing where the path needs to go and what everyone's roles are.
Or I might not be a delegator. I might be there to audit, or I might be there to fix things. I might be in there to say, hey, my job, guys, is actually to look for anomalies, but my job might actually to improve you. I might actually evaluate your conversations, look at your training, look at your instructional prompting, like basically open you up like a surgeon would, look inside take some measurements, see how you're doing. And I might determine like, hey man, you're going to do way better on a different model, or you're going to do way better if I upgrade your training or give you more data, or man, I just noticed your training is out of date. So when you think about like building out truly an agentic workforce that is self-healing, but also continues to grow itself, then you can really, for the first time, understand why this new stack, or a lazy way to put it, is so transformative. Because you're going beyond this idea of like, oh, I'm a developer and I need a database. I need some sort of middleware where I can put my logic, and I need some sort of UI where I can build my mobile app or my, whatever React app, and that's all I need, and just let me go do my work.
Yeah.
That, slowly but surely, but probably more rapidly than we believe, is going to kind of no longer be the optimal way to deploy an application, primarily because you're going to want to embrace, obviously the core of the value proposition, which is an AI driven, AI first mentality, but you're also going to want AI just to do the rest. And so when you start to commit and say, I just want AI to do it all, eventually, maybe you kind of slowly get to that point. You almost are forced to, whether you like it or not, you can't live on that old stack. You can have the old stack, kind of as a legacy thing and tie into it with an API, but eventually you're going to have to jump from that sinking ship over to this other ship, which is going to be much more scalable and self-reliant and built on a completely different architecture. You can't just transfer over what you did in the legacy world to this new world.
Right.
And I think that it becomes blatantly obvious when you just take 2 steps into the future, as I just did, and talk about what a super agentic framework would look like. And beyond this idea of oh yeah, I'm using ChatGPT to do this or that, or I'm, versus okay, I'm going to actually start building out my AI agents. I want to give them agency. And not only do I want them to interface users, aka employees, customers, prospects, whatever it might be, but I want it to actually look inwardly on a day-to-day basis and improve my business based on what it's seen. And that's kind of the phenomenon that I think that we are, facing. How fast that's going to happen, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely noticing the value of having a platform or somewhere that can manage and just oversee what's been created. But I do think the deeper layer that comes in is then building auditors that understand the business and understand the use case and understand what's happening on a client level, because it's just providing more insight to what someone's already invested time, money, energy into building and making it better over time. And that's kind of this, utopian view of AI is not necessarily to come in and gut down to the bare bones and say, now you can operate. It's really, are there ways to improve efficiencies with what we have here, whether it's human or tech?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, what's glaringly obvious to us is that the biggest inhibitor when deploying AI agents right now, the biggest inertia that we see over and over again is companies are not prepared. They have not digitized their intelligence within their company. That intelligence primarily lives in the brains of their employees and maybe a scattered group of documents and maybe some singular or multiple knowledge bases. And for the most part, might live in some CRM systems and things like that. But I wouldn't call that intelligence. That's just databases. But real intelligence, how do I do this process, right? Very few companies have done a great job of documenting that, because it maybe just changes that often. And by the time, somebody goes in and updates a document, it's already outdated kind of thing. Yeah. But this is why we exist. That's why, people are employed. It's the nature of what we're able to do is that we actually function at a high level, but we could transferring that knowledge at a baseline to AI is only going to enhance that entirety of that, the ability for that company to function and to be optimized. And then over time, that's where also AI can give you that reciprocal value proposition, which is, hey, I can do this better, or I can help you do this, or I can accelerate this process. I can build that document much faster. Now that I understand what you are doing, now that you've told me how to process this or build this document or do this task, now let me do it. I can go do it. And you tell me if I get it wrong. And it's this scale capability of human plus AI is, again, another thing that just doesn't exist with software in the legacy form, right? The new stack is purposely built to take a small amount of intelligence that a human can provide and expand it into a tremendous amount of value. I mean, that's
exponential opportunity.
I mean, that's the wow factor that ChatGPT gave us a few years ago, and that's the wow factor that agentic networks give people. Is that holy moly? Once I have this AI trained and up and running, it's infinite. I can tell it to do it 1,000 times a minute or 100,000 times a minute. I can really kind of scale its capabilities now. And you just can't do that with humans unless you obviously hire and spend the money. But again, another reason why this new stack, the the idea of like what is kind of really going to be at the center of operations of information technology moving forward. Every CIO, CTO, CEO should be considering the fact that they need to start thinking about any new development or any future development of building systems and building, ultimately building, like I said, an agentic workforce needs to be kind of thought in a completely different manner than like the old days where you would say, hey, we're going to build a software product, internal, external, to help us do this.
It's all in architecture. Like you're not just coming with a couple building blocks and saying like time to build a house. It's we have to think through this because there's nuance to it on every layer.
Yeah, and then this is going to be the biggest challenge too, is that companies are just not ready to take that dive. Like especially if you're a developer and you're not necessarily up to speed on a lot of the new stuff because you're just busy doing your day-to-day job and you're still supporting existing products. It's just going to take some time for the way that to change the general process of how we build these systems and what does that mean to be a system, right? Versus is it the days of I think building what I would call kind of monolithic centralized software, I think is going to start to fall apart primarily because people realize how complicated it is to maintain and how expensive it is to have. Where now with AI, you can spin up these small little applications. They can be agentic, and on this new stack, you can generate these things at high volume. You can change them. You don't even have to be a coder to do a lot of this work. And so I could see a world where we're going to be building thousands and thousands of apps that AI is going to manage and build and continue to operate that will help us function better as businesses. But that's I think the to be determined component of it. But I definitely think it's worth, if anything, anybody looking at the future and understanding where this is headed and kind of reading the writing on the wall. We're seeing 3 major trends this year: the vibe coding, which means basically everybody's a developer, and with vibe coding, even in the early days here, you can build some pretty fantastic things in a matter of days with zero code. And so you have to understand, extrapolate that out. You can pretty much assume that everybody's going to be
people that actually know what they're doing and how quickly things can happen. Yeah.
And then number 2 is obviously that the amount of investment and the amount of infrastructure that's going into building AI and just generally the curvature that we're on, which is pretty much a hyperscale curvature of how intelligent AI is getting. That's going to overrun and replace a lot of what we used to think of as databases, right? So the game plan, if I were to make a recommendation to anybody, is if you do have a tech team or you do have a team that you've allocated and said that this is our guys that are going to lead us into the road of AI, start getting those guys thinking about how they're going to architect and build using vibe coding, using AI to code out the core of their future, and then like looking at platforms to help them manage their AI agents and so forth, like really rethinking the architecture of the future. And then secondarily, on the business side and maybe on the data side, collecting as much of that data, centralizing your data, getting it organized, getting it ready to then be used to train your AI, which is a whole nother ball of wax that is completely different than actually a technical problem. It is really a curation, a collection, and a cleaning
house. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, it's almost like, if I were to kind of finish my point here, it's kind of like Back to the Future in 1980s. We're kind of coming into this world of like everybody's coding software, but it's all spaghetti code and messy, and they're excited about just getting stuff up and running on computers because they see the value. But we haven't yet discovered this idea of separation of layers. There was no back-end developer, front-end developer. It was just like developers just pounding stuff. And then also we were kind of looming this 2000, everything was digitized, the year 2000, and everything was still on old legacy computers, and everything was still on paper, and banks were still passing around paper checks. So like there was this like general feeling like, oh, we got to get everything digitized. We got to get out of paper on computer. We're literally going through that same cycle. It's just instead of it going from paper to digital, we're going from digital to vector store, vector databases, like ready for AI ready. And instead of going from spaghetti code, like thick software, like DOS software, to like web enablement software, we're going from this kind of old stack of web-based applications where we're the primary user to, no, we need to make it agentic software, agent-based solutions or agent-based frameworks and stacks so that AI is actually the primary user and we're the beneficiary. That philosophically, if you follow that path, then you'll be ahead of the curve.
Love it, man. Well, for everyone listening, thanks again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue this discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Welcome to the show where air takes the floor.